to introduce Rhys. He's from the MIT Digital Coin Initiative, and he's going to talk about blockchain ethics today. So let's welcome the speaker. And thank you for having the seminar to do the whole day.
Final one. This is your thing. Thank you. Okay, here you go. Yep. I will not look at the. Yeah, I will not. I am an ethical human being, and I have given you your thing back. And let me start my timer as well. Yeah, indeed. Thank you for coming. Can you hear me okay? Sweet. During this last portion. So, as Abby said, my name is Rhys, and I'm here from the MIT Media Lab's Digital Currency Initiative. And I'm here to chat about blockchain ethics. So, before I do that, I kind of want to give a little bit of the motivation here. Who's read The Moral Character of Cryptographic Work? A couple people, woohoo! About half. It's by Philip Rogaway, a cryptographer, and I just want to kind of read it straight up because it kind of gives the instinct here. He says, cryptography rearranges power. It configures who can do what from what. This makes cryptography an inherently political tool, and it confers on the field an intrinsically moral dimension. The Snowden revelations motivate a reassessment of the political and moral positioning of cryptography. They lead one to ask if our inability to ineffectively address mass surveillance constitutes a failure of our field. I believe that it does. I call for a community-wide effort to develop more effective means to resist mass surveillance. I plead for a reinvention of our disciplinary culture to attend not only to puzzles in math, but also to the societal implications of our work. That's very powerful to me, and that's, I think, some of what I'm bringing here is this idea that researchers, and what Philip is saying is researchers should also, in addition to thinking about puzzles in math, also think about societal implications.
I already object here because
Great.
scientists, suppose you developed some cool new tool.
Yeah, the nuclear bomb. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, your moral opinions matter very little.
Yeah.
I mean, because now it's a technology, can be harnessed by anyone who knows of it. So even if you're morally completely opposed to it, it's all nice and fair, but it's like, it's in the end the politicians or it's not the scientists whose opinion matters on this.
Yeah, so if I understand your question correctly, it's, hey, there's some kind of new scientific thing that might be powerful, and then even if you don't think that it's a good thing, it's not your opinions that matter, it's like how the world uses it and what the politicians do with it and all of that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Your opinion,
yeah.
You can speak about it, but like they will carry weight only if you go into, let's say, Congress or become whatever it is that sort of decides what to do with it.
Yeah, and I think I directionally agree with what you're saying, which is that there is scientists don't have if they can't just say, oh, I've learned how to make a nuclear bomb, therefore I can choose, I have the full power in this scenario. That's definitely not true. However, people do have the ability to, you can reevaluate as you're building things, how you should build them, what you should build with them, and you can reevaluate as you're building things. You can kind of affect the macro system by either speaking in Congress or changing the norms or things like that around the technology you build. So it's not purely just a one-to-one, if you think it's bad, then don't create it, but it's rather think about the implications and then address the complex system around that.
Even more so, I'm putting now my mathematician's hat.
Great.
And I have my moral thoughts, but what I'm supposed to stop pursuing a certain line of mathematics because I am worried, or it's like.
Let me give you an example, maybe, which is.
Yeah, I think that might be exactly Phil's point.
That you restrain or you redirect your.
He's making an even stronger point that you might be working on problem A related to PCPs. But actually, the field that you're in, I mean, maybe not you necessarily, but
right.
A cryptographer might be working on attribute-based encryption for TZNF, blah, blah, blah. And the fact is, you've done nothing to address mass surveillance, and so the field has failed, and in fact, you might have failed as well for not addressing the major problem. So I'm not agreeing with this point, but he's making a stronger one.
That will, math problems that you think will help fight mass surveillance, for instance?
Yes,
but we don't really know of, it doesn't translate directly into math, no?
Yeah, so I think that this, or what were you going to say? Were you going to add to that?
In some way, if I understand, I want to support it, the fact that you know how to do something it means that you devoted your life to how to do this thing. The implication, how to use it and how it affects the society and whatever, you may be the most wrong person to make decisions of how it should be used or not used. And it's a mistake to think, especially if you're an engineer, you have high IQ, you can be, you are a great, you can be a president. No, it's the opposite. We know that it's almost the opposite.
Yeah, so if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is the people who are deep, deep, deep down in the research, they're the people who are the least qualified to actually to be presidents and actually make the societal implications of those things. I think that's both true and not true, where it's like having the deep domain expertise makes you too close to it, but also, and so that you can't do like the presidential political things. And I think that knowing deeply how the technology works might help you understand some of the societal implications. Let me make one other meta point on all this. I think we should go to the next slide, which is it's nice to go after Nils because with something like Libra, it's like any word that he speaks, everybody's like, And for me, it's a little bit easier, but it's also harder in that I'm saying to all of you, hey, you need to be more ethical, or you need to be more moral, or whatever. So I think that is just a meta point that will hold throughout this talk. So in any case, Philip thinks this. So today we're going to chat a little bit about why I think blockchain ethics is an important and neglected field. We're going to chat about these 3 frameworks to understand blockchain ethics, which are tech ethics, financial ethics, and institutional ethics. And then we will conclude with some open questions for where blockchain ethics is different than other fields of tech ethics. And so I do want to note that I'm not going to be making, this is going to be kind of like a very high level, inch deep, mile wide talk, not making specific claims that like X kind of privacy is good or bad or anything like that. Let me say one other point on that, which is what I will be giving you are these lenses to start to understand the societal implications, not making any specific claims. So the example here is there's this great parable, maybe not as good as the parable that Eli said yesterday, but a good parable, which is about if you are touching an elephant, depending on where you touch it, it looks like something different. And this is true for the elephant, where at the front you're like, oh, it's a spear. At the back you're like, oh, it's a rope. But I think this is especially true for something like blockchain and cryptocurrency. It's a very complex technology, and depending on how you view it, and especially thinking about the long-term societal implications, that can be a very complex thing. And so viewing it from the multiple different lenses is very helpful. So think of this as kind of like moving through the idea maze of this kind of blockchain ethics. One note and a disclosure before I begin is, so yeah, as I said, my name's Rhys. I work for the MIT Digital Currency Initiative as the head of community and long-term societal impact. I'm teaching a class this semester on blockchain ethics with Neha Narula, and I've done stuff with this before. I led the Systems and Society track at DevCon 4, and I also, weirdly, I self-tax 10% of my income, and you can see I'm open and transparent with all of my money. So this is my Wells Fargo account, this is my Ether wallet, this is my Bitcoin wallet, so I'm kind of very pro-transparency in a lot of strange ways. One disclaimer is that I'm not an academic. I do not have a PhD, unlike almost. Who else doesn't have a PhD? Yeah. Oh, nice. 3 people. Woohoo. I was a computer science major, but I'm not a computer scientist, an or economist, or a lawyer. I'm just a dude. Okay. So, dudes are people, men, women, people, everybody counts.
Or dudettes.
Dude and dudettes, yeah, exactly. Everybody is welcome. What about the self-tax? What? It means that... Yeah, great. Perfect, thank you. I recommend it. So, step 1, blockchain ethics is an important and neglected field. So I guess just a question to the audience, based with a thumb, this being super thumbs up, like it will have a large impact on society, something like the internet. This thumbs down being like, I don't really think blockchain will have really any impact on society. And thinking of blockchain as both permissionless blockchain networks like Bitcoin and Ethereum, also things like corporate cryptocurrencies and things like Libra, maybe permissioned validator networks like permissioned like Hyperledger and those kind of supply chain things, and or CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. How large of an impact? 1, 2, 3. How big do we think it's going to be?
You have to clarify this because you say blockchain and you say
No, he's just asking.
Good question. Yeah. Okay. So
the question is not well defined.
I agree.
Because you say blockchain and then you say Ethereum and all this.
Yeah.
Blockchain is a technology.
Yeah.
The way I look at it, the cryptocurrency is just piggybacking on some technology. It was created for this, but it's now an animal for itself. And the blockchain as a blockchain for other users will be huge. But the cryptocurrency...
He didn't have cryptocurrency here.
May go
You just said that
away.
Sounds like you're halfway. I would say that I agree. I mean, this is a question of scoping question for how big it will be. But in general, people had here, I would say, pretty large. And if you think something's going to have a large impact, we should probably be aware of it. And so obviously none of us know how big of an impact it's going to be. But we think it's going to be impactful. There are kind of some conceptual instincts here around something like the internet, how you've had a lot of work on these underlying protocols, and eventually those manifest in society in a big way. And we're doing that with, if you think about the rest of the world, everybody outside versus all of us in here developing these underlying protocols, eventually they may have a big impact. And also when you change these core primitives of society, like with the internet, it was something like information, those can have these long-term emergent effects. And so with blockchain, we're doing this with not information, but kind of value and trust. And so if you change this core primitive of value, that may have some big impacts. You can also see some leading indicators or proto-examples here. If you put the anonymous white paper, aka the Bitcoin white paper, on the internet, and then 10 years later, it's using 1/500th of the world electricity, that's weird. That's kind of strange. As Nils was here, Facebook, a big company, they announced a blockchain project. The CEO spends 7 hours in front of Congress talking about it. That's another leading indicator. Yeah, weird metrics.
For the last 5 years, I've never seen a hearing scheduled as quickly from a product announcement. It was 24 hours, and there were calls for a hearing. It was insane.
Yeah, it's like we might do this thing. We kind of have a white paper. Boom, yeah, exactly. You must be on the plane. Also, for all of you researcher types, the amount of research that's happening either on the privacy side with Snarks and Starks and Sharks and Halo and Sonic and Aura, and all the new BFT stuff with Hot Stuff and Tendermint, there's a lot of new research happening here with a lot of new money filling into the space. So probably going to be impactful. We'll see. And my just instinct here is if blockchain technology has even 10% of the internet's impact, we should proactively take great care in developing it. That's the high level, the intuition. So if we think it will have an impact on society, what should we do? Create this field of blockchain ethics. And what that is it's like a field in a community of people focused around answering this question, how can we positively shape the development of blockchain technology? So it's just like a group of people who are thinking about this. It's similar to these other fields of tech ethics, as we were chatting about before. When you had something like nuclear technology, you have nuclear security. With AI, we have AI ethics. With biotech, we have biotech ethics. And so with blockchain, we kind of would expect something like blockchain ethics. I also like to think about it as different than there's... Yeah,
I just want to say that I strongly support having a discussion on blockchain ethics.
Yeah.
My only comment was that I don't think, mathematicians are they're qualified as just dudes to have an opinion, but it's not like they get to, I guess, someone like you who studies ethics and cares about it all the time are no less and perhaps more qualified than someone who proves theorems to sort of...
I agree, and I think that's back to his point around in this balance between using domain experts on the ethical societal implication side and using the domain experts of the technology and somehow collaborating between those two for understanding how to positively shape it. So when you think about this field, blockchain ethics, it's not really the state. The state does regulation. There's the SEC and the CFTC and things like that. There are companies on the other side that are optimized generally for profit. And then in the middle, there's this thing called civil society, this third space with academia and nonprofits and community organizations and unions. And that's kind of where blockchain ethics fits, is in this weird third space here. And so the blockchain ethics ecosystem is not really, is not really well formed yet. We're just at the beginning here. You have these three things at the top, and no offense to Peter, but these are essentially they're very good educational, but they're lobbying organizations. And then you have folks like Open Money Initiative and some other things like this that are trying to help how using blockchain in developed countries. And you have like some of these academic research labs that are a little bit more ethically facing. But if you compare this to something like the AI ethics ecosystem, it's crazy. You have these things that are tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of funding with dozens of centers around the world, and it's a much more mature ecosystem. And so, what I would expect is 15 years ago, that's a tumbleweed. There was nothing really in the AI ethics world. And now it's there's a whole robust ecosystem. And similarly, with blockchain ethics, we may expect to see something similar here.
A lot of ethics is funded by Bitcoin.
A lot of AI ethics?
A lot of AI ethics nonprofits are funded principally through Bitcoin. They got huge donations because a lot of Bitcoin maximalists in the early days were super scared of AI.
Can you give examples? Yep. Yeah, I think, and so OpenAI had a big thing from Peter Thiel. I know that the Pineapple Fund, which gave $55 million of Bitcoin to stuff, maybe a quarter of it went to MIRI and some of these other AI ethics research centers.
Do you think that, for example, this AI ethics organizations had an actual effect?
Had an actual effect?
I don't know, came up, everybody was roaring, but it's
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think my personal instinct is, so we're just at the beginning. This one started within the last year. This one started, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago.
We'll know when the robots don't kill us.
Exactly. And some of them have, Some of them have super long-term, these ones are more of the effective altruist, long-term, AGI-facing ones, while some of these other ones, Data and Society and FatStar, are more about AI fairness and racial discrimination, these things. So I think that I would say they have been successful thus far, at least elevating the conversation, and then they have a bunch of different mechanisms for implementing change, some of which are things like supporting protesters at companies like Facebook or Google or whatever to push against their decisions and things like that. So I wouldn't be able to tell if they've had hundreds of millions of dollars worth of impact, but I think they have had some impact.
What is FTE? 18 FTE?
Sorry, full-time employees. Sorry. This was just, I couldn't get their amount of funding, so this was just the amount of people that I saw on their website.
This is going to be quite dependent on the society. What do we know about how this AI space has played out in China, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that I personally don't know very much about that. I know that the Stanford HI Center, Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence, I know that they're funded a lot by either Baidu or Tencent, but I don't know what the AI ethics ecosystem looks like in China.
Could it be that the reason why this field is so well funded is because it poses so much greater risk than blockchain?
Yep, great question.
Much ahead of blockchain in development.
Yeah, AI is actually having impact on the world, while blockchain, for all intents and purposes, has not really. And there's another argument, which is what are the long-term implications? And if you think about making exporting or delegating decisions to computers in a lot of different ways, then yeah, you could argue that will have longer, bigger impacts on society than something like blockchain. So maybe it's the case that the blockchain ethics ecosystem should only have 10 people here instead of 6 or whatever. But the fact that it's close to 0, I think, is my main point.
Peter Thiel calls AI inherently socialist, while blockchain is inherently libertarian. So maybe he funds a lot of AI ethics to slow down that field.
Nice. Thank you, Peter.
Say that AI catastrophes are better televised, Terminator movies, and financial meltdowns are, made for poor movies.
It gets old like the Wall Street trader with the hand on the forehead.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that dude again. Yeah.
Oh no, we need the bailout.
You cannot come up, at least I can't come up with a plausible blockchain apocalypse. So
I can think of it. Hey, sorry.
Yeah, I think that I agree though, in general, and that's why when you change these core primitives, like something like thinking of changing the core primitive of information and then seeing something like Facebook red feed, blue feed things is a hard jump to make. And I think that changing these core primitives of value, there's no clear like Terminator scenario from that. It's like, oh, if we have this weird like, understanding that I think is hard for people to conceptualize. So in any case, I think that it is the case that blockchain is a at least moderately important field and is definitely neglected at this point in time. Any other thoughts on this before I go on to the next point? Okay, we're chatting about these three frameworks. The nice thing is that, so they're tech ethics, financial ethics, and institutional ethics. The tech ethics is like thinking of this as technology and also drawing from the tech ethics field, which already exists. Financial ethics is thinking of this thing as like money and thinking about like the already existing regulatory bodies there. And then institutional ethics is thinking of these new blockchain cryptocurrency networks as new kinds of mythical entities that can coordinate and motivate humans, like things like the firm or the nation state and things like that. So yeah, these are lenses. Let's chat about tech ethics. So,
Like my big apropos, apocalypse from blockchains. My biggest concern is that blockchains are a new way to sort of reach consensus on a massive scale. So right now it's about the history of payments, but some other time it could be a means for causing major political disruptions or things that are clearly immoral, like genocide or whatnot. So where does that kind of ethics fall in?
and so tell me how would blockchain lead to genocide?
As a mechanism to reach consensus, like you put your there's like you put the commitment in a way that can only be done like you reach consensus or use it as a tool for reaching consensus on things that are hard to reach consensus, let's say today, through the standard political mechanism. Right?
Okay.
Let's all agree that on a certain day or something we do something, an uprising or
Crowdfunded political assassination is
Yeah.
I was going to say assassination mark. So it depends on, I think that in general that would probably fit within the realm of tech ethics, where it's saying, okay, we have this, I'll use the assassination markets example. So there are these prediction market platforms like Gnosis or Augur, and what they do is they say, hey, you can open a market there in this permissionless, decentralized way that says, hey, what are the odds that Donald Trump is alive at the end of 2020? And then what you do is you put money on one or the other side of that, and you can imagine, you're essentially putting a market for like, oh, should this person die or whatever. And then usually those kinds of markets, when they exist in traditional betting platforms, they get taken down. But when they exist on these permissionless, trustless, decentralized blockchain platforms, it might be a little bit harder to take them down. And so that would be an issue of, I would put that in the tech ethics bucket because that is part of these new kinds, the technical affordances of permissionless, of a permissionless protocol are what enables that outcome. I'll say a little bit more on that in a second, but that's where I, in general, put that.
Following up on that point, I mean, blockchain apocalypse, it seems like if you generalize what it would be is the removal of real world authority and the replacement of it with some kind of algorithmic authority which may have unintended consequences. So if you spool forward, in the same way if you spool forward AI, you come up with Terminator or whatever, you could spool forward blockchain and come up with a world where all of the authorities have been neutered. And there's essentially, not anarchy, but basically rules which nobody can control, and you could, it could be these murder markets, or there's a million examples you can come up with. Right?
Yeah, so I think, and maybe if you state in that form, that might be closer to institutional ethics. Institutional ethics is about things like markets and firms and if you think about something like Facebook and the rise of Facebook in society and how that changed our sense-making and information landscapes and how he had kind of a revolution from our existing landscape to our current landscape, that revolution has had lots of kind of destabilizing effects on society. If you imagine a similar revolution with respect to like banking or how money flows, then that may have similarly destabilizing effects on society, away from trusted centralized institutions towards bottom-up emergent behavior stuff. Yeah. So in any case, what tech ethics is not, this is kind of confusing for people. It's kind of an annoying phrase that nobody in the tech ethics world likes. It's not philosophizing about abstract notions of what to do or thinking about utilitarianism or any of these. You don't like think about theories or things like that. Really what you do is you just say, okay, what is the system? What is this complex system? You have like laws and policy, you have like the economics and the market, you have the technology and the code, you have like your culture and your norms. How do those things like co-evolve with each other and affect each other? Oh shit, like, okay, now we can determine some of the impacts. Oh, this might be positive, this might be negative. And then you try to intervene in that system. That's really what people talk about when they're talking about tech ethics. So it's less of just like a philosophical, ethical notion thing. So yeah, you look at the affordances, you look at the impacts, and then you try to intervene. If I look at blockchain's affordances, people could disagree on which ones to highlight here, but I think of it as you have this immutable distributed database where you have, it's hard to go backwards in time and change, and I'm mostly thinking about permissionless blockchain networks here. It's hard to go back in time and change things, and you also, instead of having a centralized ledger, you have this distributed ledger. You also have the cryptography piece that has public and private key pairs, so that only I with my private key can spend my money, and the government can't take that. And then you also have this pseudonymous on that database. You have these essentially public keys that are on the database that are not anonymous but are pseudonymous. And then you also have protocols and decentralization for unstoppable code. This one's a little bit more confusing. You can imagine this as like these are some of the initial layers of the internet. And those are these protocols like TCP/IP. And you can imagine this new layer, these kind of blockchain protocols, as these protocols for value instead of protocols for information. And once you have these protocols, and a protocol kind of by nature is this, is like a trustless, permissionless system where you can just like access it. What that allows for is decentralization of the system. So this is a list of all the like the Bitcoin nodes in the world, or a map of all of them. And the reason why you can get something like that is because anybody can tap into the network and can just conform to the protocol. And so what that protocol and that trustlessness and that permissionlessness leads to this decentralization. And what that decentralization leads to is like unstoppable code or censorship-resistant money. And what that means is that you have, if you have something like Bitcoin, you want to send Bitcoin somewhere else in the world, it's very hard for the government to say like, stop doing that, because then they say, oh, should I hit the exchange? Should I hit the miner? Should I hit the human? That kind of thing. So that's kind of what this third one means, is that you have these protocols and this decentralization that lead to this unstoppable code. And so for each of these things, you can think about the impact of the affordances, and almost all of these, when you're thinking from a tech ethics perspective, you have all these kind of tensions that exist, where you have some kind of affordance, and it has both good things and bad things. And so that immutable distributed database, one thing that people talk about from the negative side a lot in their research papers about this are like GDPR's right to be forgotten. It's like, how are we going to do that if it's like immutable on a database? There's the cryptography piece, and obviously it provides you some privacy, but obviously on the negative side, we've seen the like linkability of this. That's like, pseudonymous is not anonymous. Also, what we were talking about with, or my question to Nils earlier, was that these permissionless protocols, something like the early internet, is so beautiful. It like lets 1,000 flowers bloom. A bunch of different things can exist. But then if you decrease the friction, then that can lead to re-centralization. And so we've seen that with aggregation theory, or early kind of, or with like the internet web 2.0 platforms. And we also see that to some extent with blockchain mining and things like that. And as we've been chatting about a while today, is like this decentralization piece is both good, because then it allows, the government can't punish you. It allows you to, that's good. Yeah, exactly, that's good, that's great. Yeah, when, it could be good, could be bad.
Illegal. I mean, it may not be able to find you, but that doesn't mean it can't make it illegal.
Yeah, I agree. There's, so I think an example here might be something like the capital controls in different countries, and something like Venezuela, how hard or easy it is to get US dollars versus how hard or easy it is to access Bitcoin, and that the something like decentralization might make it, even though the government can make things illegal, it might make it harder for them to say like, to punish the network, I guess.
So blockchain ethics does not include the discussion around whether things like, I see two things here that people would disagree on, whether they're happy face or frowning, right? Anonymity, the government can't punish. I mean, those both you could say those are positive or negative. Right?
Exactly, and that's kind of the point I'm trying to make here, which is that almost all these affordances can be viewed as a tension between the positive and negative aspects. So that's how tech ethics folks see the world in general, and I would say, I think that Primavera noted this yesterday, is when you think about intervening in these systems, the way you should think about it is by using this guy Lawrence Lessig and his pathetic dot, which is this idea that if you are trying to change something in a system, you can either change it with laws, so you can say like, oh, we don't want this thing to happen, like let's make a law to make it illegal, or you can change it with markets, so you can like incentivize people or disincentivize people to do it. You can change it with norms, so you can like praise people or shame people for doing the thing, or you can change it with code, where you change the underlying code. And so when you think about something that is good or bad in a system, and you're saying, oh, I want to change this thing, I think a lot of us will naturally go to law and be like, oh, let's change it with law. Or maybe a lot of us here might say, oh, let's actually just change the code there. But I think thinking about the whole set of answers here is very powerful. So that is essentially what the tech ethics perspective looks like for blockchain ethics. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that?
What is very unique for blockchain? Many of those principles apply for databases, Tor systems, onion systems, all kind of other systems that have the same. What is the very unique for blockchain?
Yeah, great question. So his question is, hey, all of these things look like things that already exist. Databases exist with things like Facebook and things like that. Cryptography has existed for a long time, and like end-to-end encryption, doing that without sending money along. And then these protocols in decentralization, like this is the internet in many ways, are these new protocols. Yeah, so I think that I would say in general, I like to look at the existing examples to understand how blockchain works. So really just using the full set of essentially actively leaning into your question, saying they are the same. We should think of them as similar things, and we should use similar ideas. And I think when we get to this next section, the thing that we'll see is different is that you're sending money along, and that it's a value-based technology rather than an information-based technology.
So, like, break it down to me. I build a zero-knowledge proof system.
Yeah.
I want to practice technical ethics. What am I?
Yeah. What should you do? Yeah.
What do I change in my conduct? What do
yeah. Good question. So the question is how, for the builders or the researchers of the world, how would they actually embody or manifest some of these ideas and actually implement some of these ideas of tech ethics? It is hard. There's this thing, if you go to ethicalOS.com, that's just a great list of resources to say, like, you essentially check all these different risk zones, and then based off of those risk zones, then you say, oh, is this going to be good or bad? And then from that, you like change how you might build the technology. What I would say in general is, I think being aware, thinking that technology is not, being aware of this in general is good. Thinking that technology is not necessarily neutral, but it could be predisposed to be good or bad. It's kind of projecting into the future when you build something, oh, what could be the positive impacts of the technology? Looking at kind of this.
Technology is neutral in the sense that I don't know of any technology or science that cannot be used for good things and for bad things, right?
It's like the guns kill people or do people kill people thing, and it's like, and I think that the thing that I would argue for is that yes, both guns and hammers do kill people, but guns might kill people more easily than hammers. And similarly with some of these technologies that we build, if you build a technology that has certain incentives built into it or certain technical affordances, then it might be more easily used to do bad things. And so you can, if you think about that, you project in the future those positive and negative implications, and then all you do essentially, or what I would recommend, is you just think about this dot and you say, hey, man, if, like, let's say you're building your Stark X, and you're worried that people are going to, that a bunch of child pornography folks are going to use it to batch their, to use it as this exchange such that, I guess I don't know if the zero knowledge exists, but they might use it in this privacy way. And what I would ask you is, I would recommend you think about how you're sharing the technology initially, what kinds of groups you share it with. Maybe as you start to build your community around it, starting to shape the norms and like trying to shame people in the community around if they're like using it for child porn or whatever. Maybe talk with lawyers about how to think about. So yeah, it's being self-aware, thinking about the future and then starting to use this. That's what I'd say.
So I think I have a comment maybe for Ellie about this. You are a co-creator of Zcash, so you are one of the people who deployed this technology to some degree, and you did actually establish norms and law and code. For example, establishing Zcash Foundation is an act of that could be viewed under the ethical framework, I think.
Yeah.
Limiting the founder's reward. There have been many actions that the company did that could be considered under
the viewing key.
I would classify a lot of them less under the technology or science and more under the, of course, when you're, let's say, leading some effort that involves humans, you can, then of course ethics is very important.
Most of these things are right, law and norms and markets are not technological.
Yeah, but what's interesting about what Ellie just said is, in law at least, this is sort of a metaphor, we have a division between, in the US, speech and conduct. And both might be expressive and bring into the world things. In the US, we say if it's purely speech, it's necessary to allow that. It's necessary to not think twice about that. We don't even want to chill speech, let alone make it illegal. But if it's expressive conduct, where you've taken speech and you've done something with it, like you're burning a flag now, you're not just voicing your opposition to the Vietnam War, then it's okay maybe to intervene. Then it's okay maybe to force some sort of greater sense of social responsibility on the person because they're engaged in an activity that can have real consequences. At the extreme end of expressive conduct, you could imagine flying a building into a plane. It's very expressive conduct. But of course, it would never have any protection under the Constitution as speech, because at this point we've got massive societal implications. So maybe writing the white paper or co-authoring a white paper describing how to implement zero knowledge proofs in blockchain is something that we don't think you should have too much of a moral obligation to question, because then we'd be stifling the free flow of important scientific ideas. But then actually implementing the white paper into a working blockchain, telling people they should use it to move their money around, telling people that maybe should have feature A or B in order to prevent its use by terrorists or allow law enforcement certain access to certain things, that's a different story. So it seems like an interesting parallel.
Yeah, I agree. So it's hard, though. Obviously, it's hard. So let's chat about the financial ethics side for a second. The nice thing also, by the way, is that Aviv already, both Aviv and Nils already talked about two of the big buckets here, so we can kind of zoom through. There's been financial ethics in history. Right now, people don't really care about this, or don't care about this as much, because cryptocurrency is only $200 billion market cap, which is 40x less than gold, which is about $8 trillion market cap, and which is a lot less than stocks and money and derivatives, which are like 700 trillion. So we're still in the very beginning stages here of the financial ethics piece. If I think about financial ethics, there are two kind of big buckets. There's the public policy goals, and then there's thinking about money and incentives as kind of a primitive and what that allows. So on the public policy goals side, they're all about managing risks and information asymmetries. And as we chat about the guarding against illicit activities we were chatting about today with KYC and AML and those kinds of things, from this perspective, you think of it as money, and you have these regulatory bodies. Like early this morning we were talking about the FATF a lot. You can also think of it as another big policy goal is investor and consumer protection. And so from that perspective, you think of cryptocurrency as, and this is cryptocurrency, sorry for the cryptographers, cryptocurrency as a security, a commodity, or a derivative. And that's folks like SEC and the CFTC in the US who think about this. And then the final one, and actually a funny example of that is from a securities perspective, there's recently Coinbase and others made this crypto rating council with these 8 folks. And what they did is they looked at securities law and kind of gave these ratings about it that said like, okay, we're going to, from 1 through 5, I'm not sure if you can see this, but we're going to rate things as like totally not a security or totally a security, with like Bitcoin being a 1 and then Ethereum being a 2, and like different things having like random different amounts here. So we're starting to see people chat about this securities thing. And then
that is like a weird distributed legal compliance strategy, not necessarily like an ethics strategy. And I think it's actually dangerous that it can be confused as the other. Like people think, oh, this is a 4 on the Coinbase ranking. It's a good thing. No. They were just saying whether we're likely as exchanges to get in trouble trading it with the SEC, not whether it's a good thing. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, I think this is, so I'd say that the ethical piece, from a pure ethics perspective, the way I think about this is that we have these ethical ideas in society, ethical and moral kind of concepts of what is good and what is bad. Those eventually get implemented and codified into policy goals and things like that. And that these policy goals of investor and consumer protection, it's like, selling people snake oil is not great. And then that turned into stuff like the SEC and the CFTC into these big regulatory bodies. And then we see, instead of this like top-down SEC or CFTC saying XYZ is a security or not a security, we see these self-regulatory organizations like this where they're saying like, oh, these things, they're trying to, it's a protection strategy for their own business.
Self-regulate to kind of avoid getting hit by regulation from above.
Exactly. And I think that the question here is whether their intention is to avoid regulation from above or whether their intention is to be good ethical actors and to make sure that people on their platforms don't buy scammy coins and things like that.
I mean, NASDAQ does that now a little bit. I mean, to be traded on NASDAQ, you have to meet certain requirements. And it is a self-regulating organization.
Oh, is it? That's interesting. I didn't know that.
That's right, but they trade securities,
Tokens.
so they have
They trade tokens.
NASDAQ.
Yeah.
You mean because securities are like a token of equity ownership? Sure. But they trade things that are always regulated by the SEC, whereas this is a rubric to figure out what you can trade that would not be regulated by the SEC.
But it's a first step. I mean, NASDAQ started this way, and the FASB started this way as well. It was sort of to avoid more onerous regulation. You self-regulate, right, so you can say, well, we're doing something, and
we're trying our best. Yeah. And I think Peter would know a lot more about whether this is like a good or a bad thing or whatever, but this is some of the initial work that's being done in this space in kind of this weird new world where it's like, oh, it's not necessarily a security or not a security. It's like maybe it lists like 1 through 5. It's like this ambiguous ground. The final piece, the final policy goal that we traditionally think about is macro-systemic stability. And this is the thing that Nils was chatting about and that Facebook has gotten a lot of people are worried about Facebook and Libra is that, hey, we have this new money and it could change monetary policy around the world and could remove monetary policy from or the ability of like developing countries to enact their own monetary policy. And so that regulatory bodies are things like the Fed and central banks around the world and things like that. So that's one side of this is the traditional public policy goals. The other side of this is the more general impact of money and incentives on society. This is a weird one, but this is just thinking like if you have money as a thing or if you have incentives as a thing, what does that lead to? And again, all these have positive and negative impacts. I think we don't need to watch this clip, but on the positive side with something like money, it's like greed is good. Greed incentivizes us to do good things. And on the negative side, it's like people will do anything for money. And we've seen this with the cryptocurrency world in a pretty extreme way. The other side of this is that you can start to use, on the positive side, like you can use mechanism design and game theory for good in these beautiful ways, but you can also use like game theory as a dark art. Do people know, who knows FOMO 3D? Raise your hand. Nice, a couple people. This was a cool thing where they, essentially it was an Ethereum smart contract where you could, there was 1 ETH in the smart contract, and you could access that smart contract. You could say, oh, I want to get that 1 ETH by paying 0.1 ETH. If I held it, only if I held it for 24 hours though. So I pay my 0.1 ETH, it gets added to the bucket. Now there's 1.1 ETH. I'm trying to hold it for 24 hours, but then damn, somebody else comes in and says, oh, I'll obviously pay my 0.1 ETH to get this 1.1 ETH here. So they do it, and then everybody just keeps on doing it until the bucket of that was just 1 ETH had 53,000 ETH, which was like $12 million at the time. And so people were calling this game theory as a dark art because they were making this new system that said, hey, we're going to mess with people and mess with incentives, and then essentially make this weird new make this weird new system. So what happened in the end is, say it again? When it overflowed. Oh, that would be nice if that would happen. What actually happened is there were a bunch of bots who were participating near the end, and it was essentially only bots. A human was able to look at all the different bots, was able to say, how do they all work? he or she was able to look at all those bots, determine how they work, and then understand their algorithm for gas pricing on the Ethereum network, trigger them to think that the gas prices were lower than they actually were, and then he was able to get in on some blocks. The bots were going, thinking that the gas prices were low and were sending low gas prices when it was actually high gas prices, and then he won the exit scam for $12 million. But yeah, we can use game theory in some evil, negative ways.
Figuring out economics for gas pricing.
Yeah, exactly.
Bot that, in your bot, how do you write the part that gives the gas price for something you want?
But I think the FOMO 3D people also got a percentage out of the bucket, regardless.
I would hope so.
Each time they got a percentage, yeah.
Like the Ponzi scheme, they you pay the top of the pyramid.
Yeah, they made the thing, so they deserve, for developing this. Yeah.
Very close.
Greed is good. Greed is good. Yeah.
It has all of the ETH in the whole world, and then
People were worried about that. People were worried it was just going to suck up all the ETH.
I have ideas for similar ones if you want. Talk later.
Join his Ponzi scheme if you want. I think, and by the way, we have about 5 minutes left. So we're going to zoom through a bit. I think the main other impact of money thing that I want to highlight here is just this ignores externalities piece, where you have money as a thing. It optimizes for certain things like securing the Bitcoin network, but that doesn't take into account the negative externalities of energy use and climate change. And so we have some of those issues as well. So this is to say financial ethics can be thought of either from the traditional public policy goals perspective, which have existed for a long time, or the money and incentives as a primitive perspective. Let's essentially just do institutional ethics, and then we can wrap up. So institutional ethics, weird. There it is. Institutional ethics is mostly a made-up term by me, but it's part of this field of new institutional economics, which started with this guy, Ronald Coase, in the Theory of the Firm in 1937, and he asked the question, hey, if markets are so good at allocating resources, why do firms also exist? Why do we have these two kinds of institutions in society? And the answer that he gave was, it comes down to these transaction costs, where if you're in a firm, you have more efficient transaction costs. You can just tell people to do things, versus in a market, you have to be hey, here's some money, someone please do this thing. And so that's why both of them exist, he hypothesized. And at this time, this kind of kickstarted this field of new institutional economics, and we've seen it with other things more recently with stuff like the internet, where there's this great piece by Yochai Binkler called Coase's Penguin, or Linux in the Nature of the Firm. That was in 2002. And it's this idea of commons-based peer production as a new way of coordinating and motivating people. And so Yochai asked the question, why do Linux or Wikipedia exist? And again, he looked at it from this new institutional economics perspective, thought about the transaction costs, thought about what they were incentivized to do, and said, oh, this is interesting. Wikipedia and other open source projects are a new kind of motivating and coordinating force in society because they incentivize people and have different transaction costs in different ways. So this field of institutional economics, we can think of these, we can also map this into the world of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, where you have a bunch of these already existing institutions that we know of in society, like firms and markets and also nation states and religions, and then we also have these new blockchain and cryptocurrency networks, which again motivate and coordinate people in this interesting way. And so you can start to think of it from an institutional co-evolution perspective, where these institutions are kind of co-evolving with each other, competing for our time and energy to participate in them. And so, a bunch of them exist. And when you're thinking from this perspective of new institutional economics, in general, you see the world through you see the world through the producers instead of through the consumers. So with something like Wikipedia versus a firm versus a market, you're asking the question where do I as a human, do I want to participate in the Bitcoin protocol? Do I want to participate in Wikipedia as a thing? Where do I want to add my time and energy? You also, you see the world as a bunch of ledgers. You see the world through transaction costs and through trust in these big ways. You think about how information and capital flow in these systems. and you think about, as Primavera was talking about yesterday, or 2 days ago, the governance of these systems. How do these new institutions make decisions? And a crucial one here, especially with blockchain crypto, is the stories behind these institutions. So something like these new blockchain networks, something like Bitcoin is saying, hey, given the, let's exit the nation state, let's run away from this existing system and build this new world over here. And then that incentivizes people to be like, ooh, that's a cool new reality that I want to take part in. So, yeah, what I would say is, you can ask these questions for how blockchain networks compete. And the thing that Eli was just asking Nils about is this, which is this idea that you have these new kinds of, you had these Web 2.0 platforms, which had these APIs, had people build on those APIs, but then those APIs were closed to the world, and then those people like Farmville or people building off of Twitter were sad. And so what you'll have in the future, what we have now with something like the Ethereum blockchain, it's very hard to close those APIs on the Ethereum blockchain because you can just you build the smart contract, it's there, it's going to run. And so that's what they call developer integrity. So these new Web 3.0 or these new blockchain network platforms have high developer integrity. And they have, right now, their developer experience is really bad. But the hope is, or the idea is that over time, the developer experience will get better and better. And it's built on this underlying strong developer integrity thing where you can't turn off the APIs, while something like Facebook or Google or whatever, they have this centralized platform and they won't ever be able to get up to this high developer integrity level. So this is kind of the things that something like these blockchain networks are competing with these Web 2.0 networks on, is something like developer integrity. Or let me say one other thing. Another thing that you can imagine them competing on is the story behind the thing. So this is, I know a lot of my friends who are into the blockchain and cryptocurrency world who are, if you're a developer these days, you have enough money and you're looking to find meaning in the world at this point. And so you're essentially looking for something like self-actualization. You're looking for meaning. And so this world of cryptocurrency and democratized incentives and being able to participate in this new building of the new internet, that's what incentivizes people to go to that world. And they're like, ooh, this is going to be super exciting and intellectually curious, and I'm going to get meaning over there. And again, over time, it kind of sucks to build in that world, but it'll get better, versus something like, and no offense, but GAFA and surveillance capitalism or whatever is a world where it's oh, do I want to go somewhere and make it so that people click more ads? And it's that is I think a lot of people are oh, I'll go and do this world instead of this world. So again, this is institutional competition between blockchain networks and these Web 2.0 platforms.
Contradictory, right? If you're self-actualizing, because it's so new and because the developer experience is horrible, once it is running smoothly and everything, then you're basically back in the lower right corner.
Yeah, so what Tal is saying is that right now in 2019, this is up here because it's this new exciting thing that doesn't have any business model problems and whatever. But then over time, it's oh shit, this thing's actually getting built. All of society's into it. It's a bad business model in a variety of ways. And then the people, that the self-actualization for developers will be I don't want to join that thing because it's not providing me with meaning. Is that your point? And I agree. I think that that's mostly true. But right now, at least, this is a competitive advantage, I would say, for these crypto networks. So I think that let me say one final piece, and then we'll wrap up, which is my main thing when thinking from a institutional ethics perspective is what we were chatting about earlier, which is evolution, not revolution. There are these concepts of creative destruction externalities, which is where when you build a new thing, you kind of destroy the old thing. Like when you built a new when people used to ship ice all around the world, and then we had refrigerators, and all the people that used to work in the ice industry no longer could work in the ice industry. And so that was both sad but long-term good. And so similarly, we've seen this with our information ecosystem, and we should be worried about it as well for our for the Bitcoin and blockchain ecosystem, with something like this being the second highest post on the r/BitConnect subreddit, which is a subreddit of for this bad scammy cryptocurrency, which is a suicide hotline for when people when it went really far down. So we just need to be aware of, as we're building these new systems, to not just build them willy-nilly. So with that, those are 3 helpful ways to view blockchain ethics, and I guess I would recommend all of you. You can go to blockchainethics.co to check out this stuff, and you can view a whole syllabus, and that's that. Thank you. Any questions?